we're still obviously learning more details about what exactly is going on here and what exactly the councils are that have been affected here. But it's quite extraordinary. This broke about 24 hours ago. Your first reaction when you heard it?
Oh, look, I was shocked and surprised, but I have to say, you know, just like any accident, waiting to happen, this was bound to happen to these guys at some point. They play silly games, they play fast and loose with time and with people, and at some point this was going to happen. And I'm just surprised at the quantum of it, to be honest, Leo.
So we have a bunch of candidates who are affected by this. I know in Penrith, there's one ward which is now entirely uncontested. Labor has just immediately won all 5 seats there. They're now 3 off a majority on Penrith City Council and could definitely get that majority with the remaining 2 wards. There's other wards where they're now just below the line. There's some where they're not running in certain wards, but they're running in others. It's a real mess. Especially not just the candidates, but the incumbent councillors, the one who are actually seeking re-election. Do you think it's fair to say that anger and fury might be words that they could be feeling at the moment, given that they, had, I imagine, left this to the party to deal with in terms of nominations, and now they're stuffed. They cannot run for re-election.
That's right. Look, I think people sometimes think of politicians and the people that are there to represent them as machines. They're not. They're people. There's a human side to this. I think first and foremost, and I have some friends who've sort of missed out here. The first thing that they feel is devastation. A lot of these people that have missed out, a lot of the very good people that have missed out, are there for the community. There are some really good quality people, and they're there for service. They're there to serve. The money isn't very good. The work isn't particularly easy, nor is it, you're not sort of changing the world. You're just helping your community. And I suppose that changes the world in a small way, but a lot of these people are just community minded, and they're just devastated. They're brokenhearted. I think anger builds over time. I think at first it's the shock and the devastation, really. Yeah.
Now, again, looking at the broader Liberal campaign here, right? They were running in a bunch of councils that they didn't in 2021. It was looking like it was going to be a pretty significant campaign, and obviously now this has happened. And you look at some of the areas where they're, I guess, more traditional, the Northern Beaches, for instance, right? Now, it's still unclear exactly what's being affected there, but we know they are affected, which is, again, extraordinary when you think of how dominant the Liberals historically have been in that area. And also, might I add, they do currently have a plurality on that council. Is this something that you think could linger in terms of the future of the Libs on local government for a while, in the sense that, like, they're not going to be able to seek re-election for these wards? You're going to have entirely new parties and councillors come in, and by 2028, they might not want the Libs back at all, even if they historically did. So do you think that's something that could now be a problem?
Look, I think the biggest problem in those areas is the threat of building up new teal candidates for state and federal seats. We know that those areas are prone to the teal approach. Council. We saw Daly use council to great effect to get an independent position in federal parliament, and a lot of people warm to their councillors. Now there are arguments, and there have been arguments made, particularly from the Liberal side, that party politics doesn't belong at council. There might be some truth to that. If the major parties didn't run and their members could run as independents across the board, that might be a solution longer term. But certainly at the moment, whilst the Labor Party is running, I think the Liberal Party is stuck and bound to run in a number of areas. I think that the impact that this is going to have, without question, is it's going to give free kicks to the political opponents of the Liberal Party, and that's going to have impacts on future state and federal elections. And I don't know what these guys were thinking, but like I think I said before, they're playing fast and loose with people's lives and with the party. And I just don't think it was particularly smart. And I think it's going to have long-term implications. Absolutely.
I'm just still looking through these list of councils that are affected, and we can already see a bunch where they're guaranteed to lose either majorities or pluralities. They are guaranteed to lose seats. And it's just Yeah, it's a mess. Mark Speakman today, he did call on the State Director Richard Shields to resign over this. Now, the reporting we've heard, and by the time people watch this, things could change, mind you, but that Shields is not going. Do you think his position is untenable at this point, given how disastrous this has been?
Look, I think there is a myriad of things that have gone wrong to get to this point. To just blame Richard Shields, I think, is entirely unfair. I think if it was me, and I do think a lot of other people are starting to look more broadly at this, there were major factional silly games that went on in this process. It really started months and months ago. It was about building pressure on individuals within the executive and building pressure on major power brokers in the party. Delay does that. You can blame the president for setting timetables on when ballots go out and what conversations are had and when, but you can also most certainly blame people like Mark Speakman's leaders rep, Mark Curre, who was heavily involved in and driving negotiations across the division. He was the guy who was supposed to be, in franchise and engaging with people and trying to get the most democratic outcomes possible. He didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. And there are some areas that don't have local government conferences, which means pre-selections are impossible. And there were supposed to be big groups of people consulted with to make sure that the broad variety of the community and the membership was supported. That didn't happen. I think there was a failure on Mark Curre's part. I think there was a massive failure on Don Harwin's part. And look, by the time it got to the very end, Richard Shields has to deal with it. He wasn't given a great deal of time. He didn't set those timelines. Don Harwin sets the timelines. So yes, there was a failure on Richard's part as well, no doubt. I think they should all go.
Going to be fascinating to see the fallout of that. Now, just quickly, we also heard yesterday, and it got a bit overshadowed, but the dates for the two upcoming state by-elections announced. That's October 19, so a month after the local elections. Hornsby and Epping. Hornsby, of course, Matt King's former seat. Epping, of course, Dom Perrottet's former seats. Both on reasonably small margins, both realistically could be lost. And you would think that having campaign issues behind the scenes a month before is something that might harm those by-election campaigns. And that's just another unwanted distraction for the Liberals at the moment. Should they be worried at all about these two seats, which I guess more would probably have been seen a couple of years ago as a bit more safe, traditional, easy for the Liberals to win?
Yeah, I think the commonly held wisdom now that is starting to build is there are no safe seats for either of the major parties at the moment. And I think that's probably a fair assessment of things. I think particularly at a state level, we're seeing a bit of a crisis of leadership there. We know that, Mark Speakman isn't as widely known as he might like to be, as the party might like him to be. I think he's doing his best to get the cut through. I think he's finding it difficult. I think people don't dislike Chris Minns. There certainly aren't any baseball bats out for Chris at this stage. He might even be enjoying still a bit of a honeymoon there. I think it's going to be a very, very tough ask to win both of those seats. I think Epping's on a very fine margin, and I think that Hornsby also. Now, I've got some views there. I'd be very surprised if independents, minor parties, the Labor Party, and others don't either chip away significantly at that margin or even potentially win against the Liberals. So I just think that it's going to be very, very tough, and I don't think anything's given, and they shouldn't take any of it for granted.
Well, hopefully at least get their candidate nominations in time for those two. Really appreciate your time. It's going to be fascinating to see the fallout from this, and we will find out exactly where these councils have been missed and, well, where they are guaranteed to lose next month. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.